And so, without further ado, I'm happy to welcome you all to Research to Get Through a Recession, presented by Claudia Natasia.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. And first, I'd like to start by thanking the Great Question team for hosting such an amazing conference. It's only half a day so far, but I had the pleasure of attending some of the amazing talks from earlier today and learned so much from the different panels and conversations that's already happening. Highly encourage you all to stay for not just this talk, but all of the other great talks that will happen after as well. So I did make it up to the Swiss Alps, but like I said, I took a funicular. And when we were up in the Swiss Alps, this was a photo I took while we were there. This was Mount Pilatus in Luzerne. I started thinking about winter and the snow. And I thought about, like, this thought came up to my head or to my mind, which is, why does snow exist? And I actually looked it up, like, what's the purpose of snow? And discovered that one of the main reasons why snow exists is to help replenish soil so that when spring comes, better and more beautiful things can grow in a healthier foundation. And that got me thinking about this talk and the idea of cycles, because like seasons, the economy also go through cycles. And sometimes the cycles are downward, which is what we're experiencing right now. But as you can see from this chart that tracks the macroeconomic condition since the 1900s, for every trough that happens is followed by periods of stronger economic growth. And as you can see, the growth becomes even stronger and stronger over the years. And it's really a matter of surviving the trough where you're healthy enough to push forward and become even better when the economy recovers. And so that got me thinking into cycles and what drives them. And I really believe that if you're thinking about research and how to establish research practices in companies, research is like a cog in this moving imagery of cogs. And I'm unfortunately, the imagery isn't moving, but try to imagine all of these cogs moving and spinning against each other. There's always one that drives another. And I fundamentally believe, and what I'll talk about today, is that research is the cog that has the ability to drive the success of companies in the recovery period. So when we're at troughs, and also accelerate the growth of companies during periods of strong economies. To describe that, we'll talk about four things today. First, return on equity. If you attended my conference last year at the UXR conference in New York, I introduced this concept of return on equity that really wasn't something I invented. It's a financial metric to measure ROI. And I tied return on equity to research investments and showed case studies on the value of research in driving return on equity. We'll revisit return on equity just very briefly to get everyone reminded of that concept. And then we'll talk about cost and how to drive user-driven strategies that mitigate costs. Then we'll talk about the different levers of retention, more from the sales metrics perspective, because at the end of the day, research, as you'll see on the examples in this talk, has to drive and has the capability to drive all of these different sales metrics that ultimately influences retention. And then finally, we'll end by putting everything together and discuss how we can orient a research culture to drive business goals. Let's start with return on equity. We'll start with a formula, and I'll break it down further in the next few slides. Return on equity is a function of net operating income and leverage. And when we think about net operating income, or when we think about ROE first, let's think about it from the perspective of buying a home. If you purchase a home, the hope is that for the duration of you owning the home, the value of the home will rise so that when you do sell it in the future, you can sell it for a higher price where you get a return on what you invested in that home, whether it's in the down payment or the mortgage that you pay month to month. Now, what drives ROE for a business? A huge lever of ROE is, of course, net operating income. And when we think about net operating income, it's pretty straightforward. It's income or revenue minus costs, but there's different types of costs, and we'll break that down even further in the cost section later. But just for an overview right now, net operating income is the function of sales subtracted by this thing called cost of goods sold, this thing called R&D expense, and other stuff here, SG&A expense, which takes into account operating expense and things like depreciation and amortization of the assets that you have. For our purpose today, let's talk about cost in general. There's a variety of costs, and accountants categorize it in many different ways. But at the end of the day, net operating income is your sales subtracted by all of these different types of costs. Now let's talk about costs. So like as you saw on the formula earlier, there are two major types of costs. One is cost of goods sold, and another is operating expenses. If you work in manufacturing, cost of goods sold is more straightforward than, let's say, if you work in tech. If you work in manufacturing, and let's say one of the startups that I work with, it focuses on agri-tech and they manufacture agricultural products, they have a clear idea of the cost of their raw materials and perhaps their production parts. So cost of goods sold is pretty straightforward in the sense that it's the literal cost of producing a particular good. Operating expenses covers things like salaries, utilities, marketing and promotion costs, and also rent of the office building. It's the cost that it takes to operate your business. Today, we're going to look at an example that covers marketing and promotions, or marketing and promotion costs. And this is particularly important because in a period of macroeconomic uncertainty, we have usually two very competing goals. The first goal is to continue to engage our customers, our existing customers, to engage them to buy more of our products and to find ways to activate and encourage new customers to purchase the product. So of course, marketing and promotions are really important, but secondary to that, we also have less funds to use to engage our customers. So let's talk about the first case study. And for this first case study, I'd like everyone to think about a small business that you love to frequent. For me, it's a coffee shop nearby. And this company that I'm going to talk about builds products for small businesses to empower them and help them strengthen the loyalty of their customers. And how they do this is through creating a way, like a mobile loyalty program where, imagine if you visit this coffee shop and you love the coffee shop and you return there very frequently anyways, you can sign up to join the loyalty program on the coffee shop, download an app that tracks all of your rewards, and the coffee shop owner can also send you text messages and promotions and deals of this coffee shop. And because you're part of this coffee shop's loyalty program that's provided or powered by this company, you can also access deals from places nearby to the coffee shop that's local to your vicinity, like the barber down the road or a restaurant up the hill. I'll start by discussing a product-driven model. So in this particular example, we had this approach originally of approaching marketing outreach from more of a product-driven lens. And what I mean by a product-driven lens is, if you think back to the whole crux of this product, which is to be able to encourage customers to return back to a particular store through this loyalty program, the product was, we'll have a text promotion. The small business owner, which is the coffee shop, they can send the text promotion to all of the people who signed up to the loyalty program or who have signed up from another store to receive communication about amazing deals nearby. And really, like the approach was, there's this one text promotion, and like this diagram shows, it's sent to all of these people with the hopes that all of these people will come to visit that coffee shop. And as researchers, if we approach this product with a product-driven model and we have the question, how do we improve this experience? We often ask ourselves, how do we improve the text message? Maybe it's the copy. Let's do some copy tests and a usability test on the copy. Maybe it's the time of when we send the text message. So let's do some testing on that. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the text message in itself. Like maybe there needs to be a different format, not a text. And so we focus very deeply on improving this product, but perhaps that's not the only way. Our question to improve that overall experience, which resonates right now as we're thinking about markets, especially in more periods of economic uncertainty, is how can we reduce costs and make this whole process more effective and efficient? And what we did to improve all of that was, one, started with user interviews to find out who exactly are the users that are engaging with this experience and this product. And then two, utilizing a combination of product analytics as well to understand which user groups are most active. And then three, do a general usability testing on messaging that resonates with specific user groups after we segmented the users based on the interviews. And what we discovered pushed us away from focusing on just a product in itself. Instead, we focus on this thing called a user-driven model. In this world of focusing on a user-driven model, we didn't start with improving the product or improving the text promotion. We started by understanding deeply who our core user groups are. And for this particular example, we discovered that there were three main user groups or main user segments. User cluster 1 that were distinctly different from user cluster 2, that were also distinctly different from user cluster 3. And because we started by being user-driven and segmenting our group to all of these three different personas, we were able to create products that are unique to each of these type of personas. And we discovered that actually one of the personas do not resonate with this particular experience, and that if we were to launch this particular experience to them, it won't be valuable to them, and that's completely okay. And as a result of being user-driven, we were able to reduce the cost that it takes for marketing to send all of these text promotions, but also increase the revenue and the conversion that we get from the text promotions, because at the end of the day, the text promotions that were sent were very effective because they targeted the user groups that would most likely convert. And I'd like to encourage researchers today to follow this example and start employing a mindset shift. Instead of asking in this market, how can we improve the user experience of our product? Shift your thinking to ask, how can we uncover user-driven strategies to help our company grow and scale more efficiently? And taking the secondary perspective pushes you away from just thinking about improving specific product experiences to overall improving company strategies to be more user-driven. I'd encourage people to shift away from thinking from a more product-driven growth or product-driven strategy to a user-driven strategy that ultimately also drives stronger product growth and more sustainable product growth. How can you do this? So the first is if you want to do cost research and find out how you can help your companies mitigate costs and thrive during periods of market uncertainties and drawdowns, the first is to identify cost drivers. What are the costs that you can control that helps the company grow efficiently? If you remember the cost overview that I shared, cost of goods sold and operating expenses, sometimes there are costs that are harder to control, like if you work in manufacturing and it's raw materials, and you don't have control over your raw materials because you purchase it from a vendor, then ultimately you have less control over that. But things like promotion costs, you can control, or things like operating efficiently, teams operating efficiently and tooling, all of those things you can control a little bit more. So find out what those cost drivers are in your company and lean in as a research organization to help find ways to make these costs or to mitigate these costs. And the second thing is to develop partnerships with the teams that are driving these costs. What are some of the cross-functional relationships that you can develop to help drive this change of reducing and mitigating costs and being more user-driven in the approaches that all of these other organizations take? And finally, actually conducting the research. And one thing that's really important that I wanted to highlight here is partnerships. Imagine if someone comes to your team and say that they want to do an audit of how you are minimizing costs in your team without partnership or without context. That is going to come across as, whoa, what is happening? We don't even know you. We've never worked with you before. So it's very important to develop these partnerships first and come in with a sense of empathy. We're all in this together. We're all part of the same company. We want the company to succeed. And this is how we as a research team can help the company succeed through employing more of these user-driven strategies and unlocking it through the research methods that we provide. So actually, I'd highly encourage everyone to spend the most time on developing these partnerships with different teams. Let's talk about retention. So the formula to measure retention is lifetime value. And lifetime value is a function of average revenue per user and churn rate. These are information that you can find usually from your revenue analytics team or from product analytics. Average revenue per user is pretty straightforward. It is for each user, what is the revenue that they generate? And churn rate is the number of users that churn after a certain period relative to the previous period. The three factors that drive lifetime value are retention, because as you can probably guess from the formula of churn is just an inverse of retention. Retention is 1 minus churn. And retention means customers continuing to purchase the product and service time and time again. Other factors that drive lifetime value, and these are more sales terms, include cross-selling, which means customers using or purchasing complementary products. Think about what I mean by complementary products is think about your company and the features that you have. A user might not necessarily use all features. They might start with using feature A, but feature B might complement feature A because it makes feature A more effective if you use both together. And there's also upselling, where customers purchase a higher end product or a higher end license or a higher end experience. And the way I think about LTV is like this choose your own adventure book that perhaps some of you have read over the years when you're younger. I know I read a ton of these. And I always have this competition with my brothers at home where let's see who can have the longest story. And that's the same thing with LTV. We want our users to choose their own adventure, but we also want to guide them to make sure that their story is richer and longer with us. And how do we think about this from the research perspective? How do we drive stronger LTV? I'm sure everyone here as researchers or people who do research have seen user journeys or created user journeys in the past. I created this user journey for a grocery delivery service and an online grocery delivery service. And essentially this user journey covers everything from exploration to delivery, where exploration, if you're thinking about an online grocery delivery service, you're browsing online and asking friends for the best grocery delivery service recommendation. Then you find one and you onboard and learn how to purchase on the app. Then you actually purchase the product, like a broccoli or a cookie, and eventually the products get delivered to your home. Now, instead of just leaving the user journey as is, like it is here, you want to make sure, especially when you're trying to help your company survive and thrive during a period of recession, that the user journey just doesn't end here. It's not enough to talk about just what users do. You should also design the user journey asking these three questions. Where are points in the user journey where you can optimize for retention? Where are points in the user journey where you can optimize for cross-sells and sell complementary features and experiences? And where in the user journey can you optimize for upsells and sell to a more premium experience? And the key to uncovering all of these spots is to find out hot spots of engagement where you can actually convert users to retain them, to cross-sell them, to upsell them. And so the ideal user journey will look something like this. If you were exploring periods of exploration and onboarding, those are very early in the user journey. Perhaps during exploration, you find periods of engagement where you can actually drive retention by highlighting coupons that will encourage users to actually visit your product, the online grocery delivery service. And then when users when they're onboarding and when they're really excited to learn more about your platform, perhaps you can use usability studies or research to find out periods of engagement and translate it to opportunities for upselling. Maybe that's where you can upsell premium delivery services in the beginning. Maybe that's where you can cross-sell complementary food verticals, because maybe people come in for produce, but you can sell complementary verticals like snacks. Perhaps you can cross-sell subscription also for delivery service here as well. The same goes for other phases later on, like discovering and purchasing. Find those golden nuggets of engagement and highlight that from those golden nuggets, from the individual learnings that you get from users here, perhaps there are opportunities for cross-sells and upsells across the entire value journey and the entire life cycle of the user when they use your product. My favorite example here is in purchasing. Maybe there's another opportunity for cross-selling AI-based recipe suggestions. This is actually an idea that I've always had. How amazing would it be if you're buying something online using an online grocery service, and then as you're about to check out, there's an AI that kind of analyzes all of the things you have in your basket and tells you, hey, if you buy this one other thing, you can create this amazing like fried chicken recipe or like, I don't know, a complex pasta or something, and recommend that. And maybe you can cross-sell that opportunity there from correctly understanding your users throughout the value journey. The one thing that I want to highlight here is the research already exists. We're all already doing these types of research, and we all already have the insights. We don't have to change our methodologies. It's really a matter of just ensuring that that we take into account these sales goals and these business goals when we deliver our insights and when we talk about our insights and when we package our insights. So the mindset shift here is, how can we, instead of asking, how can we improve the usability of this feature? Let's ask, how can we optimize engagement touchpoints to drive retention, cross-sells, and upsells and help our business thrive during periods of recession? To recap what we learned today, we started this conversation reviewing return on equity and the overarching business goal of continuing to drive shareholder value by way of maximizing income and minimizing costs. Then we talk about net operating income and how it is greatly driven by costs. And we talk about two ways we can help our companies thrive during periods of recession. The first is minimizing costs to drive net operating income. And the question researchers should ask to help minimize costs is, how can we uncover user-driven strategies to help our company grow and scale more efficiently? And we also talked about retention as a way to increase revenue or sustain revenue. And the question that researchers should be asking to help promote retention is, how can we optimize engagement touchpoints to drive retention, cross-sell, and upsells? I'll end by describing market cycles. Thinking back to the example of a cycle of snow and seasons, markets also undergo cycles. We've experienced in the last few years periods of strong hope, thrill, and happiness as we saw stock price increase and valuation of companies skyrocket. Then we reach a period that I like to call complacency, where everything was amazing, everything was high, and markets became rather complacent and thinking that, maybe this will last, like everything's going well. Then we saw periods of anxiety and panic where, because of so many different forces in the macroeconomic environment and also the political environment, geopolitical environment, we saw stock prices decline, driving anxiety, panic, anger, anger and discouraged. And in these particular, and where we are right now is actually this, I like to think we are in this rock bottom period of feeling anger and discouragement. But think back to the cycle of snow and think back to that example of the gear that I showed earlier. Markets undergo cycles. And I like to think that we are going to come back stronger than ever and reach higher peaks very soon. And when I think about the companies that will survive and thrive periods of recessions, I think there's one key that can help companies survive and become stronger than ever. And that key is research. So I highly encourage everyone here, whether you're researchers or people who do research, to unlock the power of research and orient your research practice to more strongly influence business decisions. Thank you everyone for your time today. For any questions that you may have, feel free to ask them on the Slack channel or tweet me at Claudia Natasia.
Thanks, Claudia. That was amazing.